The Soviet Moonbase plans. A long time ago, during the Cold War between America and Russia, the Soviet Union had big plans to build a base on the moon. These secret plans started in the late 1950s and lasted until the late 1970s, over 20 years. The whole time, Soviet engineers and scientists were working hard on figuring out how to send people to the moon and have them live there. Back in the 1960s, after Russia sent the first satellite and man into space, the leaders wanted to take the next big step, the moon. Their plans were to build giant rockets called N1 that could blast off from Earth and travel all the way to the moon with people and supplies on board. Along with the big rockets, they designed two different types of spacecraft for landing on the moon. One was a small lander called LK that could take a single cosmonaut, Russian astronaut, to walk on the lunar surface for a short exploration. But the most important part was the much bigger LK-700 lander, which weighed as much as 10 elephants. This massive ship could transport a crew of 4 cosmonauts to the moon along with their living quarters to stay for up to 1 whole year. All through the 1960s, the Soviet scientists and engineers built test versions of the N1 rockets, LK landers, and LK-700 ships. They practiced stacking the giant rocket pieces together in special clean rooms. The LK-700 models showed the small apartments the lunar crew would live in, with sleep rooms, kitchen, and study areas for doing science experiments. The very first step in the Moonbase plan was to land a few solo cosmonauts on the moon just for short exploration trips using the smaller LK landers. But then, in the late 1970s, the real construction would begin. The grand vision was to use the huge LK-700 ships to start building a permanent outpost on the lunar surface called Vesta Base. Several crews of 4 cosmonauts would land with all the necessary equipment, inflatable living modules that can be pumped up into rooms, nuclear power generators, lunar rovers for driving around, and tons of food and supplies. 2 cosmonauts would stay in the landed ship while the other 2 would get to work setting up Vesta by connecting all the inflatable modules with passageways and getting the power, air, and water systems working. After a few months, they'd have a basic moon base established. From there, the Soviet plan was to keep sending more crews and modules to expand Vesta into a bigger and bigger moon village. The drawings show ideas for plant-growing domes to harvest food, science labs, manufacturing spaces, and living quarters for up to 24 people. Some plans even suggested mining the moon for metals and resources. To power this entire moon base, the Soviet engineers planned to ship up a nuclear reactor piece by piece from Earth and assemble it on the lunar surface. The reactor could generate 1 million watts of electricity, providing enough power for everything. With each new crew arriving, the Vesta moon base would grow larger and larger until it became a permanent human settlement on the moon by the 1980s and 1990s. Cosmonauts would live there for years at a time, spacewalking to maintain it and explore the lunar surface up to 50 miles away. For 20 years, engineers worked extremely hard planning and testing all the rockets, landers, and base modules to make this grand vision a reality. So much effort and resources were poured into designing every little part needed for transporting people to the moon and keeping them living there long term. Unfortunately though, after all those decades of preparation, the grand Soviet moon base of the future never actually happened. There were too many unsolved problems and issues that caused the entire program to be abandoned by the late 1970s. The biggest problem was that the mighty N1 rockets, which were taller than the Statue of Liberty, just could not seem to launch successfully. Several unmanned test flights in the late 60s and early 70s all ended in explosions shortly after takeoff. Engineers could not fix the engines shaking and fuel problems despite trying for years. There were also major challenges with keeping the lunar modules pressurized and protected from space radiation for months on end. Tests in vacuum chambers showed cosmonauts might not be able to survive that long on the surface. And the enormous amount of rocket fuel needed for each single-use lander to take off and land was unsustainable. Better reusable landers were required. Ultimately though, a mix of technical hurdles, funding shortages, and changing Cold War priorities led Soviet leadership to sadly cancel the entire Moonbase program after spending 2 decades trying to make it happen. Their dreams of having full-time Soviet presence on the lunar surface evaporated. While incredibly ambitious and forward-thinking for its time, the plans for Vesta and a permanently inhabited Soviet lunar colony turned out to be just too ambitious and expensive based on 1960s technology. But the epic scope and audacious vision behind constructing an entire off-world human settlement still remains awe-inspiring even today. As new plans for returning humans to the moon take shape in the modern era, we can look back at the Soviets' incredibly detailed moonbase concepts from 70 years ago with a newfound appreciation for their foresight and pioneering efforts, even if their cosmic outpost never left the drawing board.
If you found my video content enjoyable and valuable, I would greatly appreciate your support. Kindly consider donating by visiting https://wise.com/pay/me/steinrb8. Your contributions help me continue creating high-quality content. Thank you for your generosity and support. You find the link here below. Thank you for watching.